What's up, guys? Hope everyone is doing well. In this video, I'm going to be going over some updates for Bitcoin. Towards the end of the video, I'll go over a specific theoretical, hypothetical situation for the progression of Bitcoin over the next 5, 10 years, and especially even longer, according to some paradigm shift and changes in terms of the global adoption, the institutional adoption, ETFs, and the just in general growing acceptance of Bitcoin blockchain solutions as a technology. Also bringing that in comparison to the growth rate of said technologies, whether it's the internet, mobile phones, tablets, electricity, so on and so forth, comparative to Bitcoin and being in its infancy, and how crucial and important that is to realize even during the smaller short-term, the medium-term swings of the market that are oftentimes causing a lot of people an emotional distress, whether or not they're going to lose all their money, they're going to make a bunch of money. And then finally, at the end of the video, I'm going to conclude things with going over the Bitcoin dominance, talking about alt season, and then go over a comparative chart comparing Bitcoin to a number of other blockchain solutions or cryptocurrencies. But then let's go ahead and get it started here. First off, on the 4-hour chart, we can see primarily what I want to point out here are each of these resistances here, with the primary one, the uppermost, intermediate here, secondary, and then this lowermost here, the tertiary, where the third here and the second have already been broken. Right now the price is sitting right along the uppermost resistance, the final one to break in terms of the descending resistance. Once that is broken, if it breaks, obviously, who knows what's going to happen. Could definitely see Bitcoin continue to retrace here. But if it breaks towards the upside, there is this ascending zone here that was acting, clearly you can see it was resistance here, flipped into support. Recently it's been resistance, so Bitcoin could come up to that, assuming it goes higher towards around approximately $118,000, give or take a few $1,000s. Especially if, as we look here at the RSI, kind of just been sitting in this median zone from around the last week of June, around 6 days ago at this point, where this is indicating a notion of 50-50, relatively speaking, where we could see it break towards the upside or we could see it break towards the downside here. Whether or not Bitcoin is going to retest this yellow zone once more, maybe come down to the purple zone. Maybe the bull market's over, maybe the bear market has begun, like a lot of people have been speculating and proposing in terms of the double top, the ascending double top that we appear to be seeing on Bitcoin. But going here to the 12-hour chart, we can see that here, zooming in, primarily pointing out the uppermost resistance here as opposed to those three on the 4-hour. Again, we're seeing the price sitting right along it. Something very important, I think, perhaps, is this ascending, not this ascending, but the symmetrical, this convergent triangle that Bitcoin has been printing in terms of the ASO data. Recently, it has broken towards the upside in a bullish manner as the price is sitting along its uppermost resistance. Could this potentially be indicating a break of this soon, going into the new week, leading towards $115,000, $120,000, $130,000 and higher over the medium term, over the next few months, just really within the next, within the rest of this year. Now we can also see again the resistance of the RSI has been broken. We have yet to see a break significantly above this yellow zone, which is going to be very important. That's been correlated to each of these major moves here. For example, going back in the past history, this move here, and then this move here, really just every single significant notable leg towards the upside in the bull run structure since the end of 2022. So I think this is painting a pretty hopeful picture, but again, as always, totally, does it guarantee anything? There still is this vector zone here going all the way down to around $101,500, which would, if that is met again, line up with the 200 estimated moving average, which is already, as you can see, are acted as support once. If we look here at the 2-day chart, again, we're seeing a kind of similar pattern here from the 4 to 12-hour. Now the 2-day, where we see the RSI kind of roughly sitting in a median zone here, is a little bit more biased and deviated towards the upside here, but we can see that the RSI right now is right along the 61.8 value. The RSI itself is crossed above the median of the Bollinger Bands, which it could be further indicating a bullish signal, especially thinking about that ASO, the price sitting right along its uppermost resistance. It could very well be breaking that leading into the next week, especially if this RSI continues to move upwards and breaks above the Bollinger Bands. Something similar to right here, which is what was correlated to the move from around 78,000 early April, leading into under 12,000 towards the end of May. So far, we have yet to see any notable or significant vector candles in terms of seeing like 20-30% candles, which have been, for example, here in this move, right here in this move, in this latter stages. Each of these moves so far with each of these main legs here, 1, 2, and I believe we're in the third one, we've seen these sizable 20-30% vector candles. Bitcoin is yet to see that, and it's kind of at this stage that I believe is similar to a retest of the local highs here, consolidating, and then it'll move higher. So again, that'll be akin to what happened right here. Price moved higher, like what happened here, and then the price moved higher, going really all the way back to the beginning of the bull market. So seeing the RSI here come back up towards the 78.6 value, again, is going to be very important. Basically saying what I was saying here on the 12-hour with this range breaking here, the equivalent to that on the 2-day chart is getting above the 786 right here. If we look here at this 2-day chart, we will notice first off here, looking at the price, zooming into the more recent progression, that the 50 EMA band is holding up nicely so far with this one wick into it. Could be further tested, especially if we get some rejection, so maybe coming back down to around like $98.5 thousand. That is corresponds to this vector zone that would be here. Could further fulfill that or just retest it once more. Outside of that, there's no vector candles further than that, so in terms of that frame of reference, there's no particular reason to continue to go lower unless the bull market is just over, and this indeed here is a double top, assuming this rejection happens here and it doesn't continue to go higher. Again, if you look here at the RSI, kind of just within this median zone, again, 50-50. We're seeing that from the 4-hour to the 2-day now at this point is a consistent data point. We look here at the stock RSI, you can see there is a hidden bullish divergence with the stock RSI having a descending support and the price having an ascending support. So that could be indicative of potentially going higher here rather than significantly lower. That doesn't mean we might not see a shorter term move back down to the 50 EMA in its band, or maybe a tad bit lower with some quick wicks to scare people out. If we look here at the MACD, you can see that the resistance broken here. We're testing the 0 point. Could be a very reasonable and good place to find this bounce. So far it's looked bullish here, but it could, flip back into bearish mode. But right now, I think things are looking pretty positive. We're still within that 90-day reciprocal tariff pause, obviously with the exception of China. That was causing a lot of shock to be sent throughout the market. Obviously, the traditional markets, the stock indices, so on and so forth, had a more severe reaction than Bitcoin and cryptocurrency at large did, which is, I think, a very good thing in general as well. If you look here at the RVI, again, it's just been kind of snaking around in a rough median zone with an upwards bias here, as you can tell, rather than it doing something along these lines. It's doing something along these lines. So this could be indicative of a further move here towards the oversold value range here at around 80. And as you can see, again, this is going to be similar to the values that I was pointing out on the RSI of the other and prior charts, where you can see every single time these are breaking, it's indicating the beginning of each of these major moves we've seen thus far. Again, there's also one right here for the second half of this overall move right here. So that's going to be very important if we can continue to see this move and break above that, as we're seeing this resistance here broken. Again, we'll see further price movement, I believe, more likely speaking towards the upside, significantly higher than just, a mundane 120, 130, maybe $150,000. I think, again, obviously, as I've said it plenty of times, we're heading upwards towards approximately $200,000, give or take 30,000 as a most reasonable range. Obviously, that's not a guarantee. I don't know what's going to happen. And which leads me to this weekly chart, really kind of the first chart to get kind of grasp the big picture here as I lead into really the main chart in this video on the 2-week, the monthly, and the 6-month and 12-month, is to really put a capstone in terms of where Bitcoin may or may not be heading over the rest of this year leading into 2026. So here should be a familiar chart for those of you that keep up with my videos. We have here the M2 money supply, globally speaking, here in black. Each of these purple zones, as you can see here, are going to be denoting times where you can see the Bitcoin price here is correlated. So you see Bitcoin going up, Bitcoin going sideways or down, did exactly what the M2 did, and so on and so forth. And this one orange zone here is where we see a decorrelation, where the M2 is generally going down but yet Bitcoin was going upwards, and then that trend resumed for the rest of it here, as denoted by this purple trend. Now, this has been a very interesting correlation going all the way back to the beginning of the current bull run at the end of 2022, and thus far, every single one of the notable peaks have lined up, as I have shown here in these in past videos. Now, the M2 money supply here continues to go higher and higher. It's projected that it's going to be going higher well into later this year, maybe into even 2026 as well. So, and really something that I feel like I have noticed in my, watching of this over the last number of months, every time it reaches a local peak, so for example, like here, or here, it looks like it's starting to taper off, but then it just continues to go higher. And if this trend is going to continue to follow, and there's not going to be a breaking or a anomalous deviation for whatever reason of this trend, then we could reasonably be expecting Bitcoin to continue to go higher here, and perhaps once again meet this ascending resistance zone that has characterized the peaks, the rejection points of the current structure of the bull run, where we see the first leg, second leg, and then again I believe we're on a third leg, likely speaking, heading upwards towards again this resistance zone that I'm pointing out. Now, we look here specifically, you can see the M2 made this double bottom leading into its current move. As such, the Bitcoin also did the same thing, basically copied it verbatim. Now again, we'll continue to go higher here as a extrapolation and projection of this trend and its pattern for over 2 years at this point. And what's interesting is you can see that the M2 money supply here, as it was going up, went just a tad bit above the prior local peak here, and then had this retracement and it continued to go higher. That essentially looks exactly what Bitcoin is doing right here, as it reached 112,000, just a tad bit higher than around 108, 109,000. Now we're seeing a retracement down in the 13 EMA and currently a bounce with a bullish engulfing candle. The 13 EMA has been very important. It was support here leading into 30,000. We had the consolidation, then it was reclaimed and as support here, which then led into 75K. There was the bounce here from 40 to $75,000 here going into March of 2024. Again, another consolidation where it's losing the 13 EMA, it's battling it, finally comes back above it here, bounces at it around 63K early October 2024, then moves to 108K. So this has been a very important estimated moving average throughout this entire bull market. It was also notable for resistance here during the prior bear market. So this as a bounce is very nice. Now, if you look down here at the RSI, you can see that there's this descending resistance. There's again this same exact yellow zone here that needs to be broken. And that's generally, I think, assuming Bitcoin continues to go higher here over the next number of months, over the rest of this year, then we'll see the breaking of this zone. It hasn't been broken yet. Again, it just looks like we're in this early stage where, for example, here in the RSI, it was building up to the yellow zone as the price was building up to the prior peaks. And then it broke the yellow zone and continued to go higher with notable, significant bullish volume vector candles. And now that was something that happened back here as well on the RSI. So again, we're just waiting for that moment where we break this, we break the resistance, and we'll start to see really these 20, 30, maybe even higher than 30% candles. For the most part, for example, this one back here was 29.75%, 19.7%. That one was 12. That was in the early points of this leg here. This one was 18. This one was 24. So I mean, a rough average would be, like I've been saying, somewhere around 20 to 30% have been each of these large candles so far, these vector candles. Again, there's another 20% here, also 22%. So I mean, 20 to 30% candle. I mean, as soon as we get one of those, let's say Bitcoin right now is in the leading into the new week in its earliest stages of breaking out. Let's say that the current candle, the next candle, or the candle after that, wherever it may be, 20% move from where we are now would put it towards around 130,000. Just pushing, 30% would push it towards 142,000. So I mean, we could very quickly, just in a matter of a week, see one of these, which has happened multiple times, throughout this entire bull market since its beginning. And just again, in 1 week, we'll see a 20, 30% move, and Bitcoin will be, for example, where it is 108,000, pushing towards 130, 140, $150,000. And that's just one. That would just be one candle. Typically, there's been multiple, as I've shown, candles like this throughout each of these. With the first leg here, second leg, and now the third leg. So there's at least two of those. I think we should be expecting, assuming Bitcoin's going to go up here. So let's say we get two of them in a row. Again, like let's just say around 24% up to 134,000. it stays roughly stagnant here, and then has another, like, let's say 30% move, that will take it up to around 180,000. And obviously there's going to be candles here and there that aren't as large as those, which would push it even higher. So, I mean, it starts to reach in proximity to that approximately $200,000 level. Again, give or take around $30,000 is a reasonable range that I've been pointing out for quite some time at this point. Now, the last thing that I want to point out here is, again, with respect to the double top that I've seen a lot of people pointing out, we can see that a lot of people are comparing this double top here, an ascending double top, to what we're seeing right now. Generally, this is going to be an M pattern, as we can see right here with each of these. Again, double tops are going to be shaped like an M pattern. Now, the price target of these, which is very interesting, so if you take the price target of the double top M pattern back during the 2021 double top, you can see that the price target for it basically precisely gets to where the bear market low was. Here you can see it takes the price target all the way down to basically 16,000 on the dot. As you can clearly see here, this, for all intents and purposes, perfectly predicted the bottom here. So let's say that we are seeing something like that. History, at least in this one instance, I mean, it could be more. A lot of the times, M patterns, double tops, double bottoms are, very historically tested patterns. So, I mean, it shouldn't be too out of the ordinary. This is, me being almost predictive, as in a sense of a crystal ball in a way. But if we do the same thing here, and we look at this potentially as an ascending double top, an M pattern like that of 2021, then if the price manages to, on the weekly here, close below around 78.4, then we would expect a price target to, click the wrong thing, then we would expect the price target to be a drawdown anywhere to around 56, 55,000, I believe, here, with the price target going down around 57,000 approximately. This would also line up with the 200 estimated moving average, which further kind of conveys a emphasis on the validity of this, where we would see, obviously, I already showed one past instance here of it working out basically perfectly. If it happens again, we see that price target also finding confluence with the 200 EMA. So if around $78,000 is a loss, we see we can close below that could be confirming this double top or M pattern, which could bring the price down to around $57,000, somewhere around the 200 estimated moving average. Now, that would, if it holds, generally find a horizontal support along these lines. So, I mean, for all intents and purposes, Bitcoin could do something like this, find support here, and then continue to go higher. And this could be a bull market that's going to last longer than I have been entertaining. It could lead into 2026, perhaps even 2027. Maybe we are genuinely in this extended cycle that's going to be going up gradually and slowly, perhaps something similar to 2016 and 17, into around 2028, 29, 2030 or so, where we'll actually see Bitcoin go well above 300K, 400K, 500K, maybe even upwards towards a million. Now, in general, whatever route's taken, I believe Bitcoin will be somewhere around 1 to 1.5 million by like 2030 to 2035, to give a 5-year range there. No earlier than like 2028, 2029 is where I would, all things considered, see Bitcoin reaching that range of around 1 to 1.5 million. If we look here at this weekly chart, we'll also notice here the ascending zone here, the support that I've been going over and pointing out is very crucial. So far, it's been held intact with 1, 2, 3, 4 bounces. We could potentially come back down to that, somewhere around 85.5. Again, we still need to see this RSI resistance broken. This down here is essentially what I went over here on this chart. So if we look here at the stock RSI, we can see it's also sitting right here along the median, which again, we might see a break towards the upside. We might see a break towards the downside. We're seeing, again, along the RSI and the stock RSIs from, again, 4, 12, 2-day, 4 hour, the 12 hour, the 2-day, down to the weeklies, showing this kind of this sense of ambiguity of whether or not, there's a lot of uncertainty. People, are, unsure whether or not there's even any more steam left in the boat, especially with a lot of people pointing out this double top potential, fractal-like scenario playing out. Now, if you look here at the MACD, you can see that it is also, the Bollinger Bands are compressing. They're quite compressed. They're roughly probably the same as it was, roughly a little bit bigger than back here. But now it's kind of sitting in this, again, like it's kind of a rough middle area. So we could, again, see a bounce here. We could see a rejection as well. Now, the main thing that I want to point out is the ASO here. So if we look at this comparative to price, we'll see each of these vertical lines correlated to these blue dots. I've already gone over this, but to recap this real quick, each of these crossovers here, as you can tell, every time this happens, these major moves happen for Bitcoin, and we've seen that throughout this entire bull market so far. And recently, going back to roughly mid-May, we saw the same another cross. It also broke the convergence here, the symmetrical triangles that I have pointed out here, which are, funnily enough, and coincidentally not so, I believe, relating or correlated to these major moves here, these phases and these cycles, these bull markets. Now, this again to me is a long-term thing that really puts all of this smaller time frame analysis that I've been doing in the bigger picture. Now, zooming in here, we'll also see again these uppermost resistances here in black, and then these secondary ones, these lower ones in purple here. And we're seeing Bitcoin break above it, come down and roughly retest it, and I think it's going to bounce higher. I think it's quite similar to this instance here. Again, obviously, as a more likely or most likely scenario, I think it's most likely Bitcoin's going to bounce higher here, but there's definitely still just as valid for various reasons room to see Bitcoin break lower and perhaps, end the bull market at with $112,000 being the all-time high. Now, if we look here at this weekly chart, I mainly just want to go over some Fibonacci zones. We can see that the first leg here of the bull market went up to the 457 level. Really is a zone from the 382 to the 457. So a form of golden pocket, if you will look at that way. We saw here with the rejection, resistance, then the price moved upwards towards, obviously, the top of this entire retracement itself back at 69K, 64 to 69K. We had this retracement here. And then there was this move upwards towards 108K approximately, which was finding resistance on the 236 here to the 272, and still currently that is where the resistance is lying. It's broken above it at this point, closed a number of weekly candles above the 272, and the current weekly candle right now is as high as it's ever been in terms of looking at the candle closes. The wicks have obviously gone higher, but right now we're seeing these Fibonacci zones so far being quite crucial. The next level here at the 382 right here is going to be somewhere in the value range of around 122,000. The 457 here is going to be 136,000. The 618 here is going to be 774,000, and the 786 here is going to be 222,000. So those are some values and ranges to be looking out for. So if, like, for example, maybe Bitcoin pushes up to the 382, 457, consolidates for a bit, then moves up to the 618, consolidates for a bit, then moves up to the 786, by around, so sometime leading into the end of this year. I've generally been recently entertaining summer, late summer specifically, as where I have been placing a bit more of my bias and emphasis in terms of projection. At this point, if that's going to play out something along these lines, depending upon how high it goes, let's say it goes towards 225,000. If that's going to play out by late August, the price would have to do something along these lines and have a very quick movement. Now, I mean, that's not too out of the ordinary. If we take this entire move here, and then let's say we see something similar to that from where we are now, that would take the price upwards towards around 210,000. And it would have to happen, again, very quickly, sometime by around the end of August, leading into the beginning of September, leading into autumn, and then obviously leading into winter towards the end of this year in Q4. So as I said, if it's going to top out by late August, very early autumn, then it needs to. We're gonna really see. You see these 4 series of vector candles here. You see these 3 here. You see this 1 here. We're gonna have to start seeing these soon if that's gonna happen, and we're going to need to see a rapid movement towards the upside, something along the lines of these 2 moves right here, if Bitcoin is going to reach upwards towards 200,000, especially upwards towards 230,000 by late summer early autumn, so around like August, September of this year. Looking here at the 2-week charts, this is one of the really probably the biggest chart because I haven't gone over this one yet. A lot of these I've gone over in past videos. I'm just updating them. But here on this 2-weekly chart, there's going to be a series of 3 indicators here. The first one down at the bottom is going to be the one that's correlated with each of these. The orange, blue, alternating. These are going to be indicative of where orange is the all-time highs. The bull market's beginning leading into that all-time high, and then the blues are denotive of the later stages of the bear market leading into the accumulation period, the accumulation range of the bear market. So the end of the bear market's leading into the bull markets, and this is correlated with the down here. This indicator is going to be the accumulation distribution of the open interest money flow. And every single time that this indicator gets above the value of around 57, this is when these orange zones here are going to be beginning. And as I said, these are correlated with the beginning of the bull markets leading into the all-time highs. Now here at the blue zone here, that's going to be at the value of around 30. This is again going to be, like I said, correlated with each of the lows, bear market lows into the bear markets. And what is very interesting to see is that thus far, quite literally since the end of cycle 1, going back to here in June of 2011, here we had the end of phase 1 of cycle 2, and then here we had the end of phase 2 of cycle 2, which was conversely, on the flip side, the beginning of phase 1 of cycle 3. This here is the first peak of cycle 2, or cycle 3's phase 1, which would be structurally synonymous to this period here. And the upcoming all-time high is going to be correlated to here, obviously, which would be synonymous to this final peak back here at the end of phase 1 of cycle 2. So what's interesting here is that we have yet to see the this indicator here go above the value of around 57. So either we are going to see that confirm the trend once again, or we're going to see a massive deviation from the trend, or perhaps even a full-on breaking of the trend. And really probably would be confluential with a massive paradigm change. Now, obviously, at this point in time with Bitcoin and the institutional interest with the ETFs, BlackRock, the propelling global adoption in the various sectors, nation states, down to the local level, just making simple, mundane, day-to-day payments in Bitcoin or whatever other cryptocurrency. You would think that the paradigm shift is a positive thing right now, and we would see this deviation associated with the paradigm shift, but the paradigm shift is positive, which again, really the whole point of me saying this is that it seems to be that everything is pointing to this going back above the value of 57 and furthering this trend, meaning Bitcoin does still have one more move, because the charts really don't appear to be showing anything insanely persuasive of the bear market beginning, especially looking at the fundamental landscape in comparison with that, with how pro-crypto, pro-Bitcoin America is right now. Again, like I just said, with the growing adoption and interest and acceptance of it with integration into society. Now, if you look here down here at the second indicator, the open interest money flow index proper, with this, this indicator up here would be derived from, this is the main indicator, and then this third one here, which I'll be going over shortly, is derived again from this as well. So looking here at this, which I've already gone over this, when we see each of these purple resistances here going throughout Bitcoin's history, then we see these yellow ones, these consecutive resistance breaks that have always been correlated with massive moves. Recently seeing the breakout above the yellow, still sitting above it, I think is a very positive thing. Now here, if we look at the open interest stochastic money flow index, we'll see here at this horizontal value of around basically 65, you see every single time this is breaking here is going to be correlated with these big moves here in the price. Really, it's essentially synonymous to what I was showing with that first indicator, the accumulation distribution. And we've recently seen this indicator go above this horizontal threshold, which again, history, 16 years, 15 years roughly of history is pointing to the more likely scenario that this is going to be in seeing Bitcoin go further towards the upside rather than, especially initiating a full-on brutal bear market, or even just, a more sizable correction, perhaps maybe something along the lines of that M pattern. Now, Finally, here for this 2-week chart, if you look here at the RSI, you can see first this descending resistance here hasn't even been touched yet. I think more likely than not we'll see this broken, and then we see this descending resistance zone here in black that characterizes the overall descending RSI peaks here, going from, you know, phase to phase, cycle to cycle. If the trend holds, we'll see the RSI break this purple resistance here, move towards the black at some point in time, whatever that may be, somewhere around, probably around the value of 80 if this happens, maybe a little bit higher. But if it's going to continue the trend of going lower consecutively, then the RSI for the upcoming all-time high for the current bull market would have to be below around 83. But if we do, over the next month or so, see the break of this purple resistance here, I think that's going to be correlated to seeing one of our first high volume vector candles pushing towards 120, 130,000, and even higher, as I've been pointing out. And now if we look down here at the stock RSI, one thing I find interesting is if Bitcoin's truly making a double top right here and it's going to initiate a bear market, for example, then the bear market is being initiated literally right here in the lower region of the stock RSI. And if you look back at past instances, a lot of the times that happens here up in this upper region rather than the lower region. You could make the one exception for 69K right here, but really, if you want to talk about the structure proper and looking at on-chain data itself, 64,000 was really the structural all-time high, which is right up here at the top of the RSI. You can see right here in 2017 it was in this upper zone. Right here in 2013 here it was also in the upper zone. Now obviously this doesn't really, you know, this isn't, I would think, a major factor. It totally could just initiate a bear market here and continue to trade sideways in this lower region, which, as you can see here, is indicative with bearish conditions throughout its history, always lining up with the bear market portions here of Bitcoin. But I think this is more so indicative of we're going to see another move here towards the upside rather than beginning a bear market. The stock, or the MACD here, you can see recently flipped bullish, and it's kind of just having this kind of ascending, you know, zigzag structure, which a lot of the times ends up fulfilling and entailing a further move towards the upside, which as I get to it here on the RSI, you can see a similar movement here with this kind of initial thrust and this kind of zigzag movement. We could see that even going back to 2017 here as well. We'll see one here, see one here. And I think it's very reminiscent of, again, what Bitcoin's doing right here. Right here, kind of roughly in this median zone, which is exactly where this similar initial impulse and zigzag action happened, and then Bitcoin went higher. I also think that there's a lot of similarities, as I pointed out in past videos, of the structure of the current bull run in comparison to 2016 to 2017. Now, if we go down here to the weekly for a bit using this chart, you'll see how, going back to 2013, 14, 15 here, you can see that there was this initial move of the bear market, and there's this M pattern here. That's the first M pattern. Then there's a second M pattern right here that makes up the accumulation range of the bear market low. Now, if we go to the current bull market and its prior bear market, you can see that there, again, we'll see this initial downside. Then we see this M pattern here. That's the first M. Then we see another second M in the same exact structure, essentially leading into the bear market low. The only difference here is that this second M here was descending. Going back here, this M here was horizontal. Again, you'll even see it down to the intricacy of, there's this intermediate W right here again. So we see this intermediate W makes up this entirety of that M. And then again, go back to this one, it's just a descending version of that. You can see the exact same structure. And again, as I said beforehand, there's this first M going back. See this first M right here. And another major difference here is going to be the fact that the this structure here was overall descending. Specifically, these two peaks here are descending, whereas the first two peaks here was ascending and then it started to descend. So there are some deviations. They aren't exactly the same, clearly, but they are very, very much so related and very much so similar to each other, especially so when you, as I was going over this chart here, you take a look at how the RSI is very similar, especially in these upheavals in the bull market, and plenty of other factors that I won't bother to continue to elaborate on just for time's sake at this point. Now, if we look here at the monthly chart, we'll see again ascending support here in green. Again, this is the reason why I have these already here, are because these are most like each other. There's generally also, you can see a rough ascending trend here. Obviously, it's kind of deviating and snaking around it, but there's still generally, as you can see here, an upwards trend. Same thing also here as well for this move. Again, you kind of see these deviations here and there, but overall there's kind of this ascending trend where we're seeing support leading into an all-time high. And as I said, here and here are the most like each other for various reasons. Now, if we look here at the stock RSI, you can see also it's in a similar movement here in the upper zone. So again, I think it's more likely that we're seeing a move here towards the upper portion. We have yet to see the stock RSI here to actually touch the value of 100, which happened back here in these two instances. It didn't happen back here, so it doesn't necessarily mean to needs to happen, but that is something to think about. Again, we're seeing a similar MACD movement here as well. Also as well, we haven't seen, if you can see here on the RVI, each of these notable phase cyclical peaks here across Bitcoin's history got above the value of 80 on the RVI. We have yet to see that with the current bull run in its RVI. So it seems to be indicating, assuming the trend follows through, again, that we still have one more move for Bitcoin here towards the upside, which leads me to, again, something I've been going over for many, many months at this point, probably a year, maybe longer than a year. I honestly don't remember how long it's been, but if we look here at the all-time Fibonacci retracements here, where we see taking the bear market retracement of phase 1 of cycle 2, here for phase 2 of cycle 2, then repeat cycle 3, here we see phase 1. If we go back to phase 1 here of cycle 2, we can see that the first peak hit the 618, retraced down, then hit the proximity zone surrounding the 272. If we go fast forward to phase 1 of cycle 3, we can see again bear market. First peak went up here to the 1.618, retraced, and now the Bitcoin's been moving up, taking out each of these Fibonacci levels, now sitting at the 1.786 to the 1.854. Now history shows that it should continue to go higher towards the proximity of the 272, which could be anywhere from around $175,000 upwards towards around $250,000. Also, if we look here, again, phase 2, cycle 2, bear market retracement, it just had a very parabolic, while gradual at the same time, upheaval again to the exact same proximal zone surrounding the 272. So phase 1, phase 2, and now phase 1 of cycle 3, each and every single time they have topped out at the exact same Fibonacci level. So again, I lean towards this continuing to fulfill itself rather than not fulfill itself. And then especially thinking about the fundamental landscape and all that that entails, it only seems that that's, more likely. It might even go higher and break this trend and deviate in a positive fashion towards the upside because of just how good the fundamental landscape is in terms of the adoption and the acceptance and the integration of it. Gradually speaking, obviously Bitcoin is still in its infancy, which I'll be getting to here soon in terms of the adoption rate and really kind of a little bit elaborating more on the fundamental landscape. So looking at the 6-month chart, we have currently about 21 hours left in the current 6-month candle. I've been going over this for probably over a month at this point, every so often updating. We can see here with this move, a high was set, and then there was a bear market. Then the price went up, breaking the prior all-time high. Then again, we see the first red candle here that indicated the bear market. Price went back up and broke the prior all-time high. All-time high here, set a new one. We see the first red candle. This means the bull market's in place. Then the price goes back up, breaks the prior all-time high. Again, we're just seeing a rinsing repeat. Red candle, bear market indicated. And then we see Bitcoin go up now. It's broken the prior all-time high. So had this current candle closed red, which at this point it's basically impossible unless a catastrophe or a black swan happens, this is going to avert the going back to July of 2011. So 14-year pattern and trend of whenever we see a 6-month candle close red after breaking each of these preceding all-time highs as a new bull market begins. This means that the bear market is now beginning. It's happened every single time since 2000, around mid of 2011. And right now it appears that we will be averting that. And I think to the next 6-month candle. So this means sometime second half of 2025 is, I think, more likely than not where Bitcoin will top out at rather than going into 2026. It could be early 2026, but I think going into late 2026 is not too all that likely unless we do see some sort of extended cycle due to the fundamental landscape and this kind of paradigm shift. We might be reaching that point in the adoption curve where it's really going to start ramping up, which would cause, obviously, the adoption soars, the usage of it soars, and obviously it's going to affect the price in a positive manner, more likely than not. Now, if you look here at the going into the 12-month chart, as I've went over this plenty of times, again, we're seeing this pattern here of initially there was 4 green candles, and then ever since then we've seen, beginning with the red candle, 4 green candles, then red, then 3 green candles, red candle, 3 green candles, red candle, 3 green candles. History is pointing to the notion that more likely than not, this third green candle will be when the all-time high is set for the current bull run, which again means that it will happen in 2025 according to this. But maybe we'll have a fourth one, like this instance back here in 2013, or sometime in 2026. Whether earlier or later, we'll see Bitcoin top out. So, I mean, that puts Bitcoin all-time high anywhere from around 162 to, if it happens in 2026, sometime anywhere upwards towards around 350,000. But if it happens in 2025, the upper bound would be somewhere around 245,000. Now, moving here into this chart that I came across, basically this person's going over how the traditional cycles are dead. So when I speak about the phases and the cycles, phase 1 and phase 2 making up a cycle, Bitcoin having 3 cycles so far, we're about to end, according to this structure, the first phase of cycle 3, and then it begins phase 2 of cycle 3. This person is saying that those are dead because of the paradigm shift we're in, or we can see right here that there is a denoting the chasm crossed in terms of the US ETFs of BlackRock, Vanguard, so on and so forth. Again, we're entering this paradigm shift. We're kind of still, obviously, we're 16 years into the Bitcoin and its lifespan. There's plenty of blockchain solutions. The space is saturated with altcoins, a lot of things that don't really need to be there, a lot of things that don't have any utility. And again, we're reaching this kind of maybe like a very preliminary inflection point, kind of like that first really big adoptive parabolic increase where we are kind of seeing this threshold met where obviously the US is very interested. Donald Trump is the current American president, very interested in being the Bitcoin crypto capital of the world and allowing China to not hold that title, or Russia, or whoever else it may be. So this person is generally, and this is also referencing Michael Saylor as well, and he's recently, actually, I'm not quite sure when he first said it, but recently I've been seeing things about him talking about in 21 years, Bitcoin will be $21 million. Obviously, at this point, we're about 5 years away from that. So, I mean, that would put, sometime around 2030 or so, Bitcoin being around $21 million. And he's we're basically just kind of playing with numbers where, Bitcoin is 21 million in its supply. In 21 years, it'll reach $21 million. It's kind of fantastical and whimsical in a way, to the point where it just doesn't really make much logical sense. It's kind of like, almost kind of like astrology in a way, is the way I view that type of frame of reference, and that almost kind of like cartoon logic in a way. Who knows? It could happen. Obviously, anything can happen, but it doesn't seem too likely to me. But this person's entertaining the idea that Bitcoin's just in a very, as you can see here, symmetrical uptrend, this channel leading towards 3 million by like 2031, 2032 at highest, somewhere, by a million by around 2030, which again, that agrees with what I think as well, but I just don't think that the price progression is going to look like this. I think it's the route taken is going to be different, but the conclusion of myself and this person going over this chart is essentially the same. It's really just going down to the minutia. What path is Bitcoin going to take? Is it going to gradually go up like is shown here, or are there going to be this final major thrust into the all-time high, then a brutal bear market, and then another bull market, like I think is more likely, detailed in past videos. And also lastly here, he says, we're reaching the late majority in terms of like the adoption. Hey, cycles are dead. Like I said, 10+ year Bitcoin gold rush. Bitcoin is digital capital. Corporate Bitcoin treasury, strategic Bitcoin reserves. Bitcoin equals global reserve asset. Like I said, this is all very much so related to the adoption and its acceptance and integration within society at large, not just within specific countries that want to accept it, but even intercontinentally, to where, like I said, really the kind of the culmination of this is Bitcoin as a global reserve asset, and also as really kind of the staple for ascertaining value to anything such as, altcoins will, ultimately at the most ideal sense, they derive their value and they're paired with, for example, it would be, Ethereum to Bitcoin instead of, predominantly, especially in America, people look at Ethereum to US dollar. Really kind of at the fullest extent of this, we'll see everything be valued in terms of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is that most, real, true, at least so far, with technological innovation within human history and its evolution throughout this time. Bitcoin is right now the most hard form of, value. It's the most truest sense of value that the human mind has introduced into the crucible of society and civilization at large. Now here we look at another instance of adoption and acceptance. We can see Mastercard partnering with Chainlink, enabling billions of cardholders to purchase crypto directly on chain. Now we can see also as well, and I'll pop up an image here showing a little bit more of the announcements of the details surrounding this partnership and what it stands for. But one of the things is Mastercard and Chainlink are teaming up to power swapper finance, which is going to be a new way to buy crypto directly from decentralized exchanges using any Mastercard. And there's, again, like I said, there's plenty of other things. I'll leave a link in the description for the article of this on Mastercard's website if you're interested in reading a little bit more about it. But again, it's things like this that are very important, where we're seeing the traditional systems, like Mastercard, Visa, whatever else it may be, the TradFi. Now we have DeFi, also, Web 2, Web 3. We're seeing the merging of these, the old and the new, and the merging of the old and the new is going to birth this third product, which is going to be this hybrid, this, revamping, this evolution, taking the old, morphing it with the new to produce the paradigm that we're entering with, blockchain solutions taking over what we have traditionally known in terms of economics, finances, and not just that sector, but I mean, borderline every single sector, ranging from politics at the higher scales, the higher echelons of society, and those interworking structures down to the local level of just you and I making basic day-to-day payments when you need to go get gas, or you need to buy food, or you just want to do whatever you need to do in terms of making transactions, or even using, think about IoT technology and, decentralized physical infrastructure networks, and, plenty of so many things that I could, go on and on about of how broadly reaching blockchain solutions are as a technology. And like I said, overlaying here the adoption curve of, various technologies, internet, electricity, cars, tablets, so on and so forth. Bitcoin, you'll see at the bottom right of the image, is, obviously, like I said earlier on in the video, it's in its infancy, and it's seeing quite a high adoption rate. A lot of sources will be saying, you'll see them saying that the adoption rate is right now increasing at a faster rate than the internet. Like, for example, Bitcoin reached 300 million users in 12 years, while the internet took 15 years and mobile phones took 21 years to reach the same milestone. Also, if you think about the BlackRock Bitcoin ETF and the other ETFs at large as well, but specifically the Bitcoin ETF of BlackRock is the fastest growing ETF in history, achieving the milestone of reaching $70 billion in assets under management in just 341 days. In less than a year, it achieved that milestone as the fastest growing ETF. And so thinking about this adoption curve now, also looking here at this post by Bitcoin Magazine talking about the Federal Housing Agency and its director ordering Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, which are government-sponsored enterprises that play a crucial role in the U.S. mortgage market, ordering them to explain or to explore Bitcoin and crypto as an asset for single-family mortgage applications without converting it to U.S. dollars. Again, this is all just, we're seeing this further and further adoption. And it doesn't seem like it's slowing down. Rather, it seems like it's exponentially increasing, like basically all other technologies being demonstrative of a S-curve, as you see here, and I'll bring it back up again on the adoption curve chart. which is, without fail, always essentially been that way. And like I said, if you look at the bottom right, Bitcoin is still in its infancy. So just really to kind of wrap that up with the whole idea of these, while looking at the charts, you can get caught up in, looking here at the 2-day chart or the 12-hour chart, you can get caught up in these small, medium-term movements that are quite emotionally disturbing at times, and also, quite emotionally fulfilling at times when you're making money as opposed to losing money or being in a deficit or selling at a loss, worst case scenario, or being liquidated. This is something to think about when, going day to day, looking at these charts, analyzing them and hoping that it goes higher. Just realizing the fact that if you're in this space right now, you are insanely early. You're still in the infancy. Perhaps it's been 16 years of Bitcoin, less years for a number of altcoins and other blockchain solutions, but we're still in the infancy of this. We still have not really seen any sort of, especially the most climactic inflection point for the adoption, or perhaps even for the price, where it really starts to go parabolic, assuming the adoption, once it reaches a certain point, perhaps we'll see Bitcoin just go insanely parabolic. And itself as a price will look like an S-curve rather than its logarithmic growth rate that it's seen so far, and in general, the logarithmic curve. So just kind of put that into perspective, rather looking at the smaller picture, look at the bigger picture, and just realize that, in 10, 20 plus years, if you just hold your Bitcoin or you just hold the certain viable altcoins, they're going to be exponentially more valuable, assuming that they continue to live on going into the future. Now, again, like I said, lastly here, I'm going to pull up the Bitcoin dominance here, talk about alt season. Alt season really hasn't begun yet, at least the parabolic portion of it. I would argue, and I've claimed, that alt season has begun because many of the altcoins have already set their all-time lows. So if we think about that, really alt season in a sense has already begun, but it hasn't reached that point where it's face melting like we have been used to in the past, and it hasn't really gone parabolic quite yet. And a lot of that has to do with the Bitcoin dominance. You can see here that this zone of price resistance, Bitcoin dominance, is meeting this at around 67%. So this is going to be a significant zone of resistance. I don't think it'll go higher, which would mean that alt season is further delayed or perhaps not even happening. If we look down here at the RSI, we can also see this zone here that it's been straddling since around mid of 2023. The price is increasing, higher highs, higher lows, whereas the RSI has a pretty, not too steep decline with the highs. The lows are also getting lower and lower. So we're seeing consecutive bearish divergences with hidden bullish divergences, which has sustained this uptrend on the Bitcoin dominance so far. But at some point, as it's been tapering off since mid 2023, so for about 2 years, at some point this uptrend is going to have to lose its steam, and it's going to reach that point where it genuinely dies and it actually drops off, and we'll see something along these lines towards a oversold RSI, and we'll see the dominance itself drop significantly. And I think that that is more likely to happen than the whole scenario of alt season's never happening again, it's dead, so on and so forth. It's been said plenty of times over the years in past bull markets, yet it ends up happening. A lot of times it starts to be thrown around within the the crucible of the online world and the real world right when things are about to change for alt season, and it gets really good. If we look down here at the RVI, we will also notice that it has recently finally started to really pop its head up above the value of 80 to be insanely oversold, especially comparing it to the past instances. So again, if things are getting overheated here, we've seen a continual tapering off on the RSI here. If we look here at the ASO, we can see again the bullish sentiment is dying off. Bitcoin is reaching its what appears to be its final thrust, as altcoins, a lot of them have already set their bull or their bear market lows and have been slowly and gradually building up, leading into the point where we see here the Bitcoin dominance finally start to tank here, lose the 50 EMA band, coming down to 60%, head down to 50%, and once it loses 50%, assuming that it does, that's going to mark that real genuine shift, that inflection point where the market is dominated by altcoin projects, other blockchain solutions outside of Bitcoin, where we'll see the emphasis shifted to those altcoins rather than Bitcoin. Now, also, it could be very possible as well, which I think is something interesting to mention and to entertain, that maybe we'll see Bitcoin dominance come down here and find support along the 50%, which would perhaps indicate a weaker alt season, not meaning that the altcoins won't be as bullish as they have been in past bull runs, but that means a smaller subset of the entire set of altcoins is going to be running parabolically and face melting, which I think is kind of where alt season seems to be, because like I said earlier on in the video, I believe the altcoin space is heavily saturated. A lot of them with just stupid meme coins, stupid coins that have no utility. They're literally just useless. They're just people making them trying to pump and dump, make money. Whereas all the viable projects are kind of, in some sense, they are suffering in terms of public appearance and public image, especially people who aren't already in the space and informed and educated on a various number of things related to Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and blockchain at large. So we could see, I think, very well this time around, we'll see only the viable altcoins run as opposed to a lot of the other stupid coins. But I'm sure, a lot of the other meme coins are like Dogecoin. I think Dogecoin will do good, for example, to bring up a meme coin. Dogecoin's been around for a long time at this point, like 12 years or so, I believe. And it's very much so followed along with Bitcoin, temporally speaking, in terms of its moves towards the upside. It's had large percentage gains. But anyways, here, last chart of the video to wrap things up here for altcoins alt season. What we see here from top to bottom is going to be here Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, and then here at the bottom XYO. So the idea here is we see with these first three, this is the big three that I like to call them, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano. I don't particularly view these three as altcoins. I view these, as I've called them, the big three. You could call them the Trinity or the triad. Triad would be a little bit more appropriate. But the triad here of blockchain solutions, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano. Down here at the bottom, I just have one of the altcoins, XYO specifically chosen, as it's one of the ones I have been most interested in over the last number of years, and I think provides a very meaningful, far-reaching, broad use case in terms of real-world applications as a decentralized physical infrastructure network and a data oracle. And obviously data is, very generic, and that can apply to a lot of things. Anyways, that's besides the point. The point here is that, as you can clearly see with each of these color-coded boxes here, in pink here we see the brunt of the bear market. Here in this kind of purple color we see the bear market accumulation zone. Then here we see the first move for the bull market, second move of the bull market, and then here in green we see the first leg of this overall third and final move of the bull market. So, and I could also extend this out, because this is whatever this move ends up culminating with is this overall third move. But for right now, I have it broken down to just this first leg of this overall move, which is looking like an ABCD pattern, which is what each of these have done so far. This third one is just elongated due to the nature of Bitcoin's progression and maturation over time in terms of the phases and the cycles. Now here with Ethereum, again, we can see brunt of the bear market, accumulation, each of these moves here, again, so on and so forth, as you can clearly see. Now, as we get further and further down this hierarchy, I'll call it, from Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano to XYO, so from like the staple blockchain solution, the prime mover Bitcoin, down into more and more obscure blockchain solutions, we see that Ethereum here looks more like Bitcoin than it does with Cardano or XYO, and XYO here looks more like Cardano, vice versa, than those two do with Bitcoin here and Ethereum. Which generally, to me, like for example, if I were to go over XYO a bit here in this video, I think it's quite a good sign that we're seeing in general XYO is clearly following here along with Bitcoin in each of these moves here. A lot of people, for example, I'll see on X, a lot of people saying that Bitcoin or XYO is just never doing anything. It just doesn't follow in tune with Bitcoin. Bitcoin does good, but XYO does nothing. And it completely baffles my mind, because it's like these people aren't even looking at a chart at all or comparing charts at all, because I don't see... I mean, the only reason either these people are just, to put it bluntly, stupid, or they're just, ignorantly saying things without actually looking into the data itself. Because clearly, as you can see here laying out, and as I've demonstrated in past videos, all the altcoins, especially the viable ones, such as the three I have here laid out, mentioning the three outside of Bitcoin here, are following along with Bitcoin in time. And we're reaching that point where Bitcoin's been performing a lot better. It's already passed its prior all-time high, but none of these altcoins down here, as you can see, have even gotten to the point of breaking their prior all-time high. And now we're at that point in time in the Bitcoin bull market cycle where we're seeing Bitcoin, I believe, all things considered, indicating that it's heading into its final move of the bull market. And historically speaking, that is when altcoins really start to ramp up and really start to go volatile, which is when they start to enter that face melting, that euphoric period that everybody loves about alt season, when it's actually breaking past its prior all-time highs. So I believe, again, that is where we are all seeing this. We're going to see, again, generally, we're going to see the extension of this green zone here. This is overall the third and final leg of the 5-stage impulse that Bitcoin seems to be following in suit with in terms of its bull market structure. We're going to see Bitcoin here go up. We're going to see Ethereum go up, and to price discovery. Same thing for Cardano, and I believe here for XYO as well. But that being said, as I mentioned, this is the last chart of the video. As always, none of this is meant to be financial advice, but everything said and all else gone over, I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.